Hello, and thank you for viewing the presentation for the 7W Social Studies. My name is Scott Maxfield, and all of the information that you will see in this presentation will also be contained in the syllabus, which you'll be receiving an electronic copy of. If you happen to attend Curriculum Night in person as well, you will have received your copy of the syllabus then. So as I said before, my name is Scott Maxfield, but apparently Mr. Maxfield was too long of a name for some people to say, so over the years people have shortened it down to Mr. Max. So students call me either Mr. Max or Mr. Maxfield, so if you ever hear them talk about some Mr. Max person, that's me. This is my 24th year teaching here in Lake Orion. I taught at Orion Oaks Elementary for 20 years, teaching 5th grade, and this is my 4th year teaching here at Scripps. And moving up to the middle school from elementary was the best decision I've made in a really long time because I get to spend all day teaching about social studies, which really is a passion of mine. I know that sounds pretty nerdy, but you know, I'm pretty nerdy. I inherited the love of social studies from my dad, or I must have. My brother did too. My brother is also a social studies teacher. He teaches American history at Oakview, 8th grade. And my dad was a former teacher of history and government, and so it definitely runs in our family. Some teachers became teachers because they had wonderful experiences in school. They played school when they were at home, and school was just a rosy experience for them. Well, that was not the case for me. I was not a good student for many of my years because school was not a safe and happy place for me. I was a victim of pretty extreme bullying, especially in middle school, and coincidentally enough, 7th grade was my worst year as a student. And I bring this up because I want to say that sometimes bad students become great teachers, and I think my awful experiences in school have made me better equipped to deal with and understand a lot of the students who are going through things. Whether at school or in their personal lives. And so I definitely feel like I've been able to make something that's been a very bad situation in my life into something that benefits both me and my students. We are very fortunate in Lake Orion to have the team concept in the middle school level. That's a very misunderstood concept. The team approach means that all of your students are on a particular team. So we're team 7W or 7 White. That means they have a core group of teachers who can look out for them and make sure that we meet and we collaborate and we talk about your child's progress and work together to meet your child's needs. So it makes what could be a big, intimidating school into a much smaller one as we work together to meet your child's needs. Communication between the school and home is a vital component of student success, and Team 7W recognizes the importance of that and works very hard to communicate effectively between us here at school and the adults at home. One way we do that is creating a newsletter that will go home every week. Most of the time it's sent out on Mondays, but occasionally things happen and it comes back home on Tuesday. Look for that as a school messenger email. I create the newsletter and I use a program called Adobe Spark. The benefit of Adobe Spark is that when you open up the school messenger, you can just click on the link and it's optimized for viewing on whatever device you happen to be on, whether it's a desktop, laptop, tablet, or phone. It's easy to read no matter what you're using. In the newsletter, we put important dates that are coming up, reminders, helpful information, but I think the most important or helpful information is we put a weekly agenda which shows what your student is doing in each of the core classes every day that week. My son had something similar at Oakview, and we found it as parents to be very helpful to find out what was going on because I don't know about you, but my son didn't always know exactly what we were doing on each day because he'd come home and we'd say, "What'd you do?" And he's like, "I don't know," or nothing. Maybe it's just my son, but I doubt it. So the weekly newsletter, again, will come home on Mondays. You will see my address, my email address is the return address, and if you have just general questions about the newsletter, you can reply to me, but if you have specific questions about a certain subject area, please reach out to that individual teacher. As I said, we also create a weekly agenda for all the core classes, which shows what we're going to be doing each day. That is subject to change, and we will let the students know if it happens to change, but we've done a pretty good job in the last couple of years to make sure that we stick to that. And we'll also communicate via email and through phone calls home if there are any concerns or congratulations, because phone calls home shouldn't just be ones that strike fear into everyone. We like to call home for great reasons too. I'll try not to read all of this because it is quite lengthy and boring. It will be in the syllabus for you to look through at your convenience. But 7th grade social studies is primarily world history from the beginning of humans up to the Renaissance, so through the Middle Ages. But there's also a big emphasis on geography as well, because you can't learn about the history of any place without learning about the geography. So we will focus a lot this year on how the environment or how the geography influenced how and where people settled, and also how people interacted with the environment and how they interacted with the geography. We will also focus on historical thinking skills and content area literacy, because students read and write differently depending on what task they're doing. And that varies greatly from subject area to subject area. So this year, they will be reading and writing as social scientists. They'll be reading and writing in math as mathematicians, in science and ELA and so forth. So we'll be assessing students on different literacy standards related specifically to the social studies. The first thing we started with this week is the methods of a historian. So we look specifically at how historians go about doing their work, and not just historians, but other social scientists as well, specifically geographers, archaeologists, and anthropologists. We then get into the beginning of human societies. We start out with the Paleolithic era, the Old Stone Age. We move on to the Neolithic era, the New Stone Age, which is when humans started developing agriculture. That was a huge turning point in human history. That leads to the beginning of early civilizations. Early civilizations leads to the rise and fall of empires. We also talk about world religions and their historical impact. And then we end with the Middle Ages. Might seem boring, but there's a lot of really interesting things that have happened in there. And the story of how we went from basically being cave people to leading right up to the Renaissance and people like Leonardo da Vinci is a fascinating one. So my passion for social studies will take a subject that many students find boring and make it one of their favorites. The expectations I have for students are consistent with those of my other teammates. We expect students to be independent and take their initiative to do their best. To be on time and prepared for each class, to make sure they have their materials each day with them, which for them will be a binder. I'll talk about supplies in the next slide or two. And when we do get computers, their laptop. We expect them to use their class time efficiently and effectively. That will really reduce, or if not eliminate, the amount of homework that they have, and that will come in later slides as well. If students are absent, it's their responsibility to figure out what we did, and one thing that I have right when we walk in the classroom door is a bulletin board that says, "What did I miss?" and it has a folder stapled to the wall for each day of the week, and right when they come in, they can just grab extra copies from that. So that's an easy way for them to figure that out. They also need to make sure they notify their teacher when they turn things in late. That mainly deals with assignments on Teams, because if something is turned in late on Teams, we don't get notifications for that, and so they need to make sure they let us know. Students are graded using standards-based grading. So instead of letter grades that you may have had in the past, they are assessed on specific standards. 4 meaning that they are proficient in that standard. So we expect students to try to shoot for a 3.5 to 4. A 3, if you see a 3 on Power School leading up to a report card, that doesn't mean anything bad. That just means they're working towards meeting that standard. Most of these standards can't be met for quite a while, and so 3 means they're just making good progress on that. Anything below a 3, then that's when we need to have a conversation. The only time you'll see a 0 is if there's nothing turned in. A 0 means there's 0 evidence that they are working towards meeting that standard. Any assignment that is missing will be marked missing in PowerSchool, and when you check PowerSchool, it'll have a red tag on there for missing. It'll also be marked with a 0, kind of as a placeholder, because again, that is showing 0 evidence towards meeting that standard. In regards to PowerSchool, please log in on a computer, because the app version is pretty much worthless. All it does is show you the number score they have for that class, but it doesn't give any specific information on standards or assignments. As I mentioned before, if students are absent, they can check the What Did I Miss board in the classroom, where extra copies will be kept. I also have other extra copies as well. Students are given a day for each day they're missing, or not missing, each day they're absent before it gets marked missing in PowerSchool. So if they're out for 3 days, they get 3 more days. After that, it does get marked as missing. But the good news is, as long as they turn it in, the missing goes away, that 0 goes away, and they get the score that they earned for that assignment. As you know, the last few years have been far from normal. And so for the past couple years, many people have just kind of thought that the students could stay home for a while and just get caught up virtually, and that's not an option anymore. There is no more Dragon Virtual, and so we are really trying to make attendance a big emphasis this year. Overall, across the district, attendance has really dropped over the last couple of years, and we just want to emphasize the fact that having your student here at school is by far the most important thing that we can do to make sure that they are successful. Students' job when they're in school is to be a student, and I firmly believe that when they go home each day, that they need to focus on what's important outside of their job, which is to be a kid and to be a family member and a friend and a teammate and all things like that. So I will not assign very much homework. I believe in creating a work-life balance right from the beginning, and so I want them to enjoy their time outside of school. The only way they would have homework is if they didn't finish something in class, and I usually give ample time for an assignment to be finished, but if it doesn't get finished in class, it is homework. And the other exception is when we have a test. I will always give a minimum of a week's notice when a test is coming up, and the students will also get a study guide for every test, so they know exactly what they need to study. So it'll never be a surprise. So the only homework your child should have is if something wasn't finished in class or studying for a test. The supplies for this class are a composition book and a 1-inch binder with dividers. That's the most important one. The composition book we don't use as much, but we will use the binder almost every day. Loose leaf paper, if they have some to clip in their binder, would be good. I do have some here. Pencils are always a plus. I have pencils here. I firmly believe that I will give every student a pencil if they need it. Some teachers just plain out don't give pencils out, but I will always give pencils out. I'll complain about it every now and then about spending my own money to buy pencils, but I will always give out pencils. But if they have some, that is great. Colored pencils are something that we also use. Again, I have extras here, but sometimes students like to use their own materials. Students are assessed on 5 history standards on the report card, one for each of the eras that we study. So you'll see it says communicate conclusions about humans living during the Paleolithic era, Neolithic era, Bronze Age or Age of Civilizations, Iron Age or Age of Empires, and Middle Ages. As well as the 5 history standards, there are literacy standards for reading. We have 3 literacy standards, and then 4 writing standards. Very often those standards will be mixed in with some of the history standards assignments, but sometimes they will be additional lessons just to teach those reading and writing literacy standards as social scientists. This is an approximate schedule of the assessments that are mandated by the school district. Students have already taken the growth measure pre-assessment, which is the only test I'll give them, and I told them that I expect them to fail. I expect them to not do well on that, because they haven't learned anything in the class yet. We give that exact same test in June, and the purpose of that test is to see how much they grew from last week until June. And so that's not anything they needed to study for, and it's nothing they need to study for at the end. They will just learn the material by just being awake. And then you see the common assessment schedules, schedule that follows. Some of those dates might be changing, but they'll all be pretty close to that. Here's a breakdown of when we'll be learning about the different eras. Right now we're doing methods of a historian, then we have the Paleolithic era, we get into quarter 2, and we have the Neolithic era, and we start the Bronze Age. In quarter 3, you'll be dealing with the Iron Age. That will then lead into quarter 4, and then we'll get to the Middle Ages. And this is a list of essential understandings that your student will gain this year, broken down by time period. I won't go through that now, but you will see this in the syllabus. Thank you very much for watching this video and taking the time to learn about your students' experience here in social studies on Team 7W. Thank you very much.